Tonight we have a special guest, a very special guest. We've got our good friend Cale Nisley, who a part of a world championship kickball team of ours. But tonight he is Mercer County's action aficionado, and we're going to talk a little bit about Roadhouse.
That's right. I'm happy to be here, Chad. I am really excited to talk about Roadhouse. Not the second one, the most recent one, right? So, I'm excited to do it.
I think we'd be remiss to talk about the new one if we didn't talk a little bit about the old one at least, and kind of do some compare and contrast. Because
I think there is a Roadhouse 2 though, wasn't there?
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh wow. So I had no clue. I didn't know that at all. Now this is why you're here, Cale. This is to learn stuff.
So Cale, I gotta ask, when you went into this for Roadhouse, when I started seeing it being advertised and everything else, I was excited. I loved the first Roadhouse. I thought just a fun action filled, movie. What was your first initial thought process before you seen it? You just watched a trailer or something. What was your thoughts?
I was also excited. I knew, having seen, it's Jake Gyllenhaal, it's Conor McGregor, who we've never seen acting in a feature-length film, and knowing that Jake Gyllenhaal had done some other, fighting-related movies. I think Southpaw, right? Was he
great in Southpaw? And
so I thought, okay, maybe somebody can, there's a chance that this can live up to the original, because I'm like you, Clint. Great movie that really, impacted my love for action movies.
Yeah. That's always a hard thing, like when they go to remake a movie, right? Even if it's a better overall movie, right? Because there's sometimes that'll happen, right? They remake it and it's a way better actual film, but it's still it's not the film you fell in love with, right? And so that's where I'm always on edge when I see movies like this coming out or getting released, because it's always what do you do to this?
I think they knew their source material, right? It can't be too serious. It needs to be a little over the top. And from the trailers and stuff, you could tell, hey, it's going to pay homage to where it came from, and it's going to be full of action. Whether or not it always makes sense, it's going to be action packed. So that did excite me as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that feedback. And to talk about, Cale mentioned his love for action movies and stuff like that. I want to throw out a little bit more of his credentials, because Cale has watched every single episode of MacGyver. So I feel like that there makes him a professional in this topic. So, but
I think you could probably throw Walker Texas Ranger into that same category, and also similarly seen almost every episode of that probably. So
I love it.
That's impressive on its own, because those are those TV shows that you don't realize how many episodes there actually are of those. Those things that were on weekly. I mean, they racked up the episodes back in the day.
How many episodes are in one season, Cale? Do you know off the top of your head?
Well, so MacGyver is not nearly as impressive. It's much shorter, fewer seasons, and fewer episodes per season. Whereas Walker Texas Ranger, it's like you said, it's absurd how many episodes there are and how many seasons there are of that show.
Good. So let's get into the actual movie of Roadhouse. You already talked about a couple of the main characters that are in this with Jake Gyllenhaal and Conor McGregor. Starts out pretty interesting of trying to understand who this character is. And again, this is the interesting part for any of us in this, certain age bracket, right? Although Cale is much younger than you and I, Chad, but anyway, you're kind of comparing him to Patrick Swayze right off the bat, right? Right out of the gate.
Well, and that's what you're expecting throughout this movie, right? You're going to see everything is going to be compared from beginning to end. So,
well, yeah. And it is a contrast, because you learn really quickly, hey, unlike Patrick Swayze, who's this professional cooler, right? We learn that, Dalton in the new movie is, kind of a loser, down on his luck, kind of scamming people for money, maybe a former, fighter of some kind. We don't totally know. But right off the bat, you're right. There's a big contrast between, this Dalton and the original Dalton.
What a great opening scene too. Like, a good way to introduce that character is to have him come in, and you've got who is it? The rapper. His name escapes me right now. Oh, Post Malone. He's got Post Malone in there. Is the first guy he's just in there just destroying everybody. And then you see Jake Gyllenhaal, Dalton walk into the ring, and all of a sudden, once they realize who it is, like nobody, no, I won't take it. I'm not doing it. I give up. I give up my money, all that stuff. So then you immediately set the precedence for this guy. This guy's tough, right? Like he's going to be a problem.
and Frankie, the bar owner, who's coming there in search of this tough fighter. She's actually looking for Post Malone's character,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
She's heard of him, and hey, that's who I want. Well, maybe not.
The interesting part about that, on how they set that up too, which I thought this is a little bit refreshing for action movies like this when they're introducing, the primary character. I don't know about you guys, but I'm fully anticipating every movie that I watch like this, that this guy is an ex-Navy SEAL, an ex-Green Beret, like an Army Ranger, like insert whatever special forces that this guy is. Like that's what I was expecting the moment that came on. So it was a little bit refreshing to find out that, this guy's a UFC fighter. Now, some may argue that made some things later in the movie maybe less believable than if he really was a special forces, but
Yeah, totally agree.
Agreed.
And it's refreshing, and it's also, I think that's a speaking to your age again, because we talked about we're our next episode, we're going to go into the 80s and 90s action films, and every single one of them is going to be, and it's always like something like that, like it's a hidden secret, right? It's like you don't find out until later that this guy he's on everybody's list across the world as the greatest whatever special forces, who's got 500 confirmed kills and stuff like that. So yeah, this is refreshing.
Him as the cook on this warship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Stay tuned for that conversation. So, but what are your overall thoughts on this movie then, KO, Clem, both of you? Like what was your take on it?
Well, I think in general, what you're looking for, and you introduced me as the action movie aficionado. What you're looking for is you've got your hero, you've got your attractive female character, you've got the bad guy who nobody likes, and maybe there's some ancillary characters who kind of help move the story along, and then of course you've got your problem. And in this case, right, it's the bad guys who are trying to shut down and get the Roadhouse to sell to them. And so for me, it does have the formula that you look for in the although Dalton is not a special forces, Army Ranger or that kind of thing, it literally has every other piece of the recipe that you'd like it to have, as far as that action movie recipe that worked so well in the 80s and 90s. And of course, why fix something if it's not broke? So I think that's where this movie excelled.
Well, I really think too, it really played off a lot of the 90s films, because in the 90s, I think that we've seen that shift that a lot of times in the 80s, in my opinion, the bad guy was as bad of a guy, as tough as a guy as our hero, right? In the 90s, you've seen this shift where it's like, the bad guy is a weaker guy, or he's a businessman or something of that nature, and he just had his tough and rowdy crowd around him, right? And that's almost what this played off of, right? Where it's like the guy who's actually the bad guy, I mean, Dalton can just wipe him like in a couple of blows, right? But that was, I did enjoy that piece of like a little bit of that homage back to the 90s, and in my opinion anyway, of like, here's the bad guy, but here's his really tough henchman,
That's exactly right. Every one of those movies has the bad physical guy that, again, was some sort of special, he's got some sort of crazy backstory or whatever, just the exact opposite of the hero, of the protagonist here. So,
and this movie knew exactly where it came from, right? When Dalton rolls into town on the bus, what restaurant is sitting there, right? It's the Double Deuce Cafe or the Double Deuce restaurant. They know exactly where their history is and where they came from. So I really appreciated those kind of Easter eggs that they sprinkled in for those of us that are old enough to have seen the original.
Well, my thing is, I don't think this movie exists or would work, which overall, my personal take on this is I really liked it. It's not like it's not going to be something that I'm going to rant and rave about, but I really like this film, and I don't think it would exist if it wasn't for its predecessor. Because there's enough. There's enough of a difference that it makes it that it can stand on its own, but it also follows that same kind of formula to make it one and the same in a lot of ways. And again, like you said, they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were trying to like. They were very aware of their goal in this, and so it's a little campy. There's some crazy stuff. You get hit by a truck and you just shake it off. You do stupid things like that. But it's fun. It's a fun movie, and it's a great homage to the previous one. I think. I don't think it would exist without the others.
The two things that I look at in this film that one of them I really liked, and one of them that I kind of disliked, or I wish they maybe build upon it a little bit more. But the first thing that I did like, I loved Dalton's attitude. Like he had like this incredibly likable character that like even having like I thought his backstory of why he was like a bad guy was incredibly weak. Like it was like, okay, you lose your temper, and it's like, okay, like whatever. But I loved his wittiness and just his ability to like, when he's talking to you, he's going to just beat the crap out of you. It's like he was so confident that it's like, he's just going to walk right through all of you.
Yeah.
You know that.
And I actually watched this with my wife, and she made a good point that a lot of those little quips in the middle of a fight really toned down some of the violence. I mean, there are some really violent parts of this movie that, could get a little over the top, and not in the campy good way that, we know and love, but almost like, oh my gosh, this is brutal. Yeah. But like you're saying, Clint, his attitude, kind of the quips in the middle of the fight, sort of broke up, sort of the brutal nature of some of this stuff. And okay, this is still a fun movie, kind of is how I took those things, which I appreciated.
But it also is a throwback to the original film, because that was Dalton's idea there, Patrick Swayze, where it was constantly, be nice. When you're kicking them out, be nice until it's time not to be nice. And that's what he did the whole, like, so he wasn't outwardly saying that, but that was his whole personality. I'm going to be nice. I'm a nice guy. I'm the fun loving guy. And then all of a sudden I'm going to do all these crazy, roundhouse kicks to your face type of thing.
Yeah, the one thing, so then going back to the one thing that I disliked, I feel that the writing didn't know what direction they wanted to take this movie. Like multiple times that it's like, we're going to build off the bookstore a little bit. There's going to be like some really good storyline in this bookstore, and it's like he stops there one time, has a conversation, and then all of a sudden is like bonded to this family for like life. And I'm like, I just don't feel like you developed that relationship for me to think that you're going to like leave them millions of dollars and all this other stuff, right?
But it's the same thing with what they did with Red in the first one, like when they blew up his gas station or whatever. And so like but I agree. And I feel like at the end, like they didn't really like dwell on it much at all. It's like they burned it down, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, that happened, until the very end.
And Clint, it's really a throwback to, I think that action movies sort of arose out of the classic Western, which is part of what the bookstore girl was talking about, really. Oh, you're kind of the Western hero who rolls into town. And that is very true, right? I mean, I think they know that, hey, the plot cannot be too thick here, right? It needs to be superficial. Exactly. And you're right. There are certainly some points at which you're like, well, wait a minute, why is there a crocodile here and not an alligator? And this bar that only can house about 40 people, how's it making this kind of cash flow to pay this guy? And all these, there are certainly some issues, but
even the overarching reason why they wanted to buy the Roadhouse, I thought was incredibly weak. Like it's like some like weak real estate play, right? And
exactly.
Like, and it wasn't even like a cool real estate play. We didn't even get to like see what it was for or anything of this. I mean, it was literally like, I want to build a hotel.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm willing to kill everybody.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I want to build this 18-hole golf course with some homes around it for rich people. And
Yeah.
by the way, like if I wanted to offer you enough money, I could. And you're right, Clint. There are certainly ways to go about completing that transaction without all of the time and money and bloodshed that they spilled trying to complete that transaction, which of course never occurred.
But again, it's I totally agree with all that. But again, you don't want to mess this movie up with a complicated plot, right? You want to see Jake
Yeah.
Gyllenhaal versus Conor McGregor going at it and like you know doing all these crazy kung fu moves or whatever that they've learned throughout their life. Which here's another thing. So tell me what was your thought on Conor McGregor, like his whole role?
um, I thought again for kind of the unhinged, you know, I think his name was Knox. You know, he's the unhinged henchman who gets called in and he's psychotic and crazy.
Yeah,
I thought he did a great job. I think, you know, the fact that he had kind of the Irish accent and kind of played himself in many ways.
yeah.
I think for fans of the UFC, fans of Conor McGregor, I think it was the perfect character. Now, are there better actors? Are there other people who could have played the bad guy in this movie? Sure, but I think for what this movie was, I think it worked.
I almost feel like he wasn't in like actor mode. He was in like his character when he's like weighing in and when he's like getting, trying to hype up a fight, right? He's like this, over the top character, which that's truly what he just felt like, right? He just felt like that, like the Conor McGregor that we know. Now, the thing that I enjoyed though about that cast, about casting him specifically, is giving Jake Gyllenhaal a UFC background and then having one of the, most famous UFC fighters be the bad guy. That's awesome. I mean, that was such a fun little thing, because I would assume that you guys were thinking the same thing I was, where it's like, man, if Conor McGregor actually walked in here, he would destroy him, like this wouldn't even be a fight.
Well, and I think, you know, I would ask you guys, but this is kind of delving into why do I love action movies? Why is that my favorite genre of movie? It's because it's brainless, it's fun. You know the good guy's gonna win, right? It's it's short-term stress, short-term excitement. You're never too invested in the characters, and it kind of removes you from your everyday stresses, right? I don't want to watch a drama that's long and drawn out and stressful the entire time about a relationship or some political dissertation on whatever it is. And so for me, given that that's why I love action movies, I felt this was a great movie. Well, how do you?
And
So I guess my question for you guys is, you know, are you similarly drawn to action? Because you guys, you cover a wide range of movies and films, right? So, but for me, I really, if I'm going to the movie theater, 9 out of 10 times it's for an action movie. In part because the action movie lends itself to the big screen better than any other form. Because you can, if you like mystery, well, you can read a book and it translates well, right? If do you like comedy, you can go to a musical or a play and it's fantastic, right? But the action movie stands on its own as the big screen is the perfect forum for that type of film. And again, I think it's for me, it's because it's so audacious, it's so out there, it's so fun, and it is stupid sometimes, but it's like that's what I like about it. It's an escape. So how do you guys feel about it? Is that the similar thing that draws you to action movies?
so I'll jump in and take this one, Chad, first
Yeah.
here. I think for me, what's drawn me to action movies from the very beginning, right, of just like a kid, I feel like it's the one type of movie that when you're watching, you don't have to understand everything, right? Like it's a show and you're just enthralled in all the action and everything else. I remember, dad watching TNT or whatever, right? And whatever action movies on, I'm enthralled, right? So I think just that alone, I think is a draw, like that it's just fun to watch. The other piece I also look at, probably from maybe a guy's perspective of looking at this, which is you kind of want to be that guy, right?
Yeah.
Like you want to be the hero, you want to be the action star, to some extent. And I'm not saying you want to go beat up people or anything, but you want to be that person who can protect people and things of that nature. So I think there's like just this draw, that masculinity aspect where it's like I want to be able to protect people like that. So yeah, I mean, I think that's at least a couple thoughts in my head on why I like action movies.
Yeah, and I'll echo that in a lot of senses. And like first off, I totally agree with your being able to like because I'm thinking about our next episode is going to be revolved around our top action films of the 80s and 90s, and like I don't know that I know the plots to any of them. You know what I mean? Like it's the pageantry, right? That's what it is. Like I think you and I talked a long time ago about a bunch of guys watching the movie Desperado, and it wasn't about like it's what Antonio Banderas is doing, and like the way like same reason you probably watch like WWE or even
Yeah.
sporting events. Really, it's the pageantry of it. It's like it's guys that are doing things that we can't, and you want to be. They say all men are like great in their dreams and that sort of thing. And I think that's what it is. It's like yeah, I want to be that guy. When I was a kid, I would act out these. I would play these roles of these characters. I mean, I know that I was which character I was in most of these movies, and it's kind of wild to think back. But to answer your question, Kale, that's where I've been. I don't know that I respect it as much as I used to. As far as like you look at the new ones, it's probably Mission Impossible. John Wick has been unstoppable. But Mission Impossible is probably the leading action film genre, and I really like them. But I don't go out of my way to go to the theater to see them like I should. And whereas a lot of these, I feel like I've transitioned at some point. So yes, I love action movies. I always have, but I don't feel like I love them like I used to. Same thing with comedies. I don't feel like I do comedies as much as I used to. I don't know. I don't know
I
what it
think a
is.
lot of things have transformed though over the years though too. I mean, Marvel are all action films,
You're right.
right?
You're
It's
right.
just the action films of this generation, right? And they have taken it a step further where it's an action, it's a drama, it's a comedy. You're getting everything in these giant blockbuster films, which makes it to where it's like it's really hard to figure out, is this an action film? Is this a drama? Where do you
Yeah.
put this? Is this fantasy? Like I think it's so many people that wrote Guardians of the Galaxy off. They're like, well, I can't watch that. That's a movie out in space, right? And it's like, but it's amazing if you sit
It's
down and watch it, right? And
yeah.
and I think they're trying to tie almost all these together. There's a love story mixed into all these, right? Like all those things. I think it's just the transition of where kind of action films have kind of come outside of your John Wicks and
Yeah.
Equalizers and some of those. Actually, I think we're kind of getting back to where we're seeing some of these pick back up again.
So
But
like let's go through that generation because I think we've talked about how someone said that Marvel films and superhero films are the new westerns. So maybe that's what it is. It's in those in a certain time like the 70s or whatever it was. You had the western genre, and then the 80s and 90s, late 80s, early 90s probably, you had the action stars, the Navy SEALs or whatnot, and then you move into the superhero roles. So like maybe that's just the transition of it, and you're exactly on point with that. Like it's just I don't know what the next genre is going to be, but maybe there's something else out there that we're about to tune into and be totally into and wrap our lives around and make it a huge part of our personality. So I'm excited about it. I don't know what it's going to be.
so I do have one more question though for you, Kale, around the Roadhouse here. When you compare the old versus the new, just in fight scenes alone, where are you at on that?
100% old, because I felt like the fight scenes were, it was like sped up, and it was CG, the truck running him off the bridge and knocking him into the water. The CGI was almost kind of bad, right? Whereas the fight scenes in the original, and Chad, you just watched it, it's pretty legit. It's pretty realistic. The punches, the sounds of the punches are fantastic. So the fighting to me, it's hands down, the original.
Yeah, if there was an advantage to the original, it has to be the fight scenes. One thing, did you hear how they did the fight scenes on this one? That's a little fun fact of interest. Like
I did
they
not.
they tried they tried a new type of fighting style where they did CGI it, but it's basically I'm not sure exactly how it worked, but basically it was something where they they start going into the punch and they don't even have to get close to it, and then they finish it up with something I don't know, but it's a brand new type of CGI, and I think we'll probably see more of it. It's just in its infancy right now. So this is the first shot at trying this new type of CGI fight style. So, and I do agree. I don't feel like you could really, like I always said, like in the Dark Knight, one of the biggest problems I had was everything's too fast. It's like I can't. I want to see that roundhouse kick to the face. I want to see somebody going flying through a table and whatnot, and you couldn't see it in this movie. So,
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what you guys just said, which is I feel like the original was you felt like it was an actual bar fight, right?
Yeah.
Like you felt like you could have walked into the Roadhouse and watched these guys like, beating each other up, and it felt real to that extent. The thing that I disliked about this, not only on the CGI side, the fight scenes were exhaustingly long.
Oh,
Like
so long.
so I'm like, it's just like before too long, I'm like, guys, we've spent 25 minutes just punching each other in the face. Like, can't somebody win at this point in
Yeah.
time? Like, let's move on to the next scene here.
Yeah, when's this boat run out of gas, man?
Ah,
I'm tired of the boat chase. So I agree
Yeah.
with that too. It's exhausting. I was like, all right, cool. We've seen
How's,
this.
how's the dinghy keeping up with the 21 footer with 200 horsepower outboards?
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I know like this goes to like the CGI. The closest thing that I felt like the way that they did show that, the movies that kept popping in my head have been like the latest in the Fast and the Furious series, like where everything was just over the top. And it's like, I don't mind if there's like a little bit of over the topness, but it's like if 80% of the movie is like, you know, the boat ramping, and how is the guy like still like even remotely there, right? Like there's just like so much stuff that ends up happening that it's like, I don't know, I feel like they went a little too over the top on that side of it. But again, I will say Jake Gyllenhaal's character, I think, is what saved this entire film. Like to me, I fell in love with that character. Like that
Same.
was, I love the personality, love the conversations. I thought that's the part there where the biggest strength of this film.
Yeah, I love Jake Gyllenhaal in general.
Yeah, and I know, we're kind of drawing to a close here. What I would say is the reason I love this movie is because it's taking us back to those 80s and 90s films, right? And so was this better than, Die Hard or something like that? No. But we haven't seen these kind of movies, right? It's been all the action or superhero movies. It's been developing the stories where you're not sure, is this even an action movie? Is it a drama? Is it this or that? I mean, this was pure. It was what I'm looking for. Was it executed the best possible way? Probably not. But the fact is, it's the closest thing I've seen to, what I love. And so for that, it's like, I'm going to latch onto this and say I liked it. And, come on, Hollywood, let's keep pumping these things out. So,
Kale, I love
right.
that take. Are you going to ask him to rate it
with
yet?
That, I got to ask, what's the rating?
So you got to rate it. And now remember, 10 is a perfect film, and 1 is like, we're never going to get to a 1, but 10 is a perfect film. What is your rating?
I would rate the film a 7, based on the fact that you have to compare it to all films, right? And so, but if I were to compare it to action movies in the last 10, 15 years, 8.5 or a 9, right? Because this is what I love. But if I have to compare it to all of the greats of, yesteryear, 80s and 90s, 7 is probably a reach.
So all right. So we do on a point system. So we usually do, like for me, I'm going to do a 6.6. A 6.6, which is on the Mirko Movie Guys scale here. A 6 is solid. 7 is fantastic. So somewhere in between there. 8 is a must see. So are you saying, like, you kind of talked about the 8? You said a 7, but then kind of lent to an 8 or a 9. Are you saying more like a 7.5? I'm not trying to lead you here. I'm just curious.
I think if I'm comparing it to movies of all time, I'm where you are, Chad. I think it's a solid movie in the sixes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Perfect.
I had this written down as a 6.4.
Okay.
And that's not like, that doesn't mean I will watch it again, right? Like, this
Yeah.
will be one of those movies that when it's on, I will there's going to be multiple scenes that I'll want to watch multiple times, right? I think the very first bar scene, when he walks outside and he breaks the guy's arm, I loved that entire fight scene. Like, I will watch that fight scene multiple times.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I'm gonna go with the 6.4.
There will be a lot of Sundays where I'll do the same thing, where it's like I'm laying on the couch. Let's turn this one on. Maybe I'll sleep through the middle part, and then I'll wake up to a boat race or whatever's going on. You know, so I'm with you. I'm totally with you.
That's the best part about it. You don't have to pay too close of attention.
Exactly.
True.
You still get it. You still get
True.
it. So next episode we're getting ready to go to. We're gonna take a break, and then we'll do another episode after this. We're gonna go into our top 5 action films of the 80s and 90s. So I think we've got a vibe set. We'll talk about it a little bit in the next one. I don't know if everybody's on the same board. I don't know what everybody's list is consisting of, but I think we all we know what we're looking for, right?
I think this next episode is going to be really fun. So if you're still tuning in, we got a part 2 that will be launched, sometime shortly after we get this one out. And so with that, the credits are rolling.
The lights are coming on.
That's the end of the show.